Live. Right, hello, good morning. Welcome to May the 3rd, the day after, the morning after, the first swathe of results in the 2024 local elections. My name is Ben Walker. I'm the co-founder of Britain Elects and data journalist with the New Statesman, and I'm very tired. So, to be honest with you, I'm doing a broadcast now, so I'm going to tell you, in my view, what's happened, analyse some key results, tell you what to watch out for later during the day, and then also, straight after this, I'm going to go to bed, and I can't wait. But anyway, look, about a quarter of the council seats that were up yesterday have now been in. I've been able to process pretty much almost all of them, and I've been able to put them on the map that I've been advertising all throughout the night on the Britain Elects feed, which you can find on sotn.newstatesman.com, which, has the ward by ward map. You can pan it on your phone or on your desktop computer. You can see every ward that is up for election, how they voted. You'll notice when you click on the map, though, it's awfully sparse. We've got a lot of we've got a lot of urban England up for grabs. A lot of also rural England, but they haven't come in yet. They're going to be counting throughout much of later today and indeed tomorrow. So anyway, we had a quarter of the results in, and the general impression is not much has changed. So we had a huge Super Thursday last year on the 4th of May, in which around about 8,000 council seats were up for grabs, and just to reiterate, only 2,700 are up this time round. So in terms of, when you look at raw changes, just bear that in mind, okay? You've got 2,700 up for grabs this year. It was 8,000 last year. It was a huge measure of public opinion in England back then. It's a bit more limited now. But the general impression is, based on the quarter of the results we've had in so far, is nothing much has changed. What happened in May last year when Labour was almost between 15 and 20 points ahead is near enough the same now, with the exception being it seems as though Labour's lead is just that little bit bigger. What we've seen over the course of tonight is that in some areas, Labour doing a little bit better than what it did last year. So, for example, Grimsby in North Lincolnshire, last year Labour made very little headway. This year they almost swept the board in the town seats that were up for grabs. Another part as well, you have Labour making serious headway and taking control again of Hartlepool, and then also, in certain commuter, affluent, middle-class parts of southern England, you see Labour making some surprising gains. Last year, it was in a council area called Bracknell Forest, which Labour took completely by surprise. This year, a place called Rushmore, which has a strong military tradition, traditionally Tory military tradition, has swung Labour straight, it was a straight con to lab switch. Would you call it a shock? I would say it was one of those results that, took me by surprise as well. At the same time, you're having Labour win quite comfortably in more traditional battlegrounds like Redditch and Plymouth. Plymouth Labour, started the night with, 1 to 2 seats. They ended up sweeping the board, or almost. In Portsmouth, you started the night with the Conservatives having about half the seats up, and then ending the night with just one. You started the night in Lincoln with the Conservatives having about half the seats up, and then also ending up with one. What we are seeing is a similar result to what we saw last year, but just that little bit worse, because Labour's poll lead nationally is not 15 to 20 points now, like it was last year. It's more like 20 points or 20-something points. We don't really know. I don't think we can say with certainty yet, but it does feel as if that is what we are seeing on the local election battleground. So, I'm just going to walk you through some of the, what can I say? Some of the results as we have them, and I just want to talk about some of them for you. So, first of all, just to remind you, all of England and Wales has a vote for something, okay? We're only looking at the council seats here. All of England and Wales are by and large voting for mayoral, police and crime commissioner, or a combination of the two, or even a combination of the three with the council results. Okay, we're only looking at council here. And what happened is, as some of you were fast asleep, we weren't getting results straight away because there were 3 ballot papers to pass, which was a bit annoying for the counting staff because they had more work to do, God bless them. So, things took a little longer. It was we started to get Sunderland very soon, and you'll notice these are the results, by the way. These are the results that we have, not the previous results, not how they voted 4 years ago or 3 years ago, but how they voted yesterday. And we'll just start with Sunderland. And though you do see a lot of blue, you see a decline in the Tory share. Take this ward here on the outskirts of Sunderland proper. You have the Tories winning with 46%, but they're down 11 points. Take another one, such as here, Hendon ward, which was Lib Dem 3 years ago, but has since returned to Labour by the narrowest of margins. Look at that. Labour 40% to the Lib Dems 39. One I do want to pay attention to, I think, is actually this one as well. One of the wards, the seats that Labour picked up from the Conservatives, was a ward where the Labour vote didn't really move. In fact, in percentage point terms, it went down. It went behind. It fell back. But the Tory vote fell by 14 points, which gave Labour the seat. And who was the biggest beneficiary? Reform. They picked up 14 points here in Sunderland. What we saw in Sunderland, which, by the way, I would need to emphasise for those of you looking to make, on the spot analysis, we saw, a decent reform share, decent support for reform, but of the seats we've had elsewhere, it hasn't really been replicated. Mind you, we don't have all the results in. We only have a quarter of the results in. But the disproportionate performance of reform in Sunderland, just needs taking into account, really. Anyway, another result I wanted to show. Look at this one, St Anne's Ward, another Labour gain from the Conservative. And if you look at the horizontal bar chart, you can pretty much see almost half the Conservative vote, or half the Conservative vote share, becomes reform. And I think you have it somewhere else. Look at this one as well, Ryhope Ward, another seat gained by Labour. And you see Reform coming into a very clear second, the Conservatives losing 35 points, Reform rising 26, Labour rising 10, and the Tories falling to third in a seat they once represented. That's quite something, I would say. Quite a unique thing. So Sunderland, you saw decent Labour advances, big Reform breakthrough, but no Reform seats. And we haven't seen that anywhere else, by the way. So pretty, in terms of Reform's performance, pretty isolated in terms of coming second, in terms of getting, around 30-something% of the vote in some of the seats. Now, you are looking here at Tyneside and Teesside. Well, it's just Tyneside, isn't it? And you'll notice it's not quite as red as it used to be. And here we have South Tyneside, which is South Shields and Jarrow. And what happened throughout was a smattering, a whole swathe of independent candidates sweeping the seat off Labour. You look at this, you look at that, long history of voting Labour, and yet you have the independent just coming out of nowhere to pick up 42% to Labour's 38%. Another seat here, Westow, just nearer to the centre of South Shields. Independent candidate getting 61% of the vote, up 32 points, Labour falling 15. And you'll also notice the big blotches of green. The Greens do have a presence in Tyneside, but they are growing it. Look at this. The Greens picking up 70% of the vote in this ward. Yes, it's all low turnout, but you shouldn't be making that caveat anyway. The Greens picking up 70% of the vote here compared to 30% for Labour, which, by the way, is a drop of 20 points. Note the absence of a Conservative candidate here who once was getting around about, 15, 20%, I suppose. Yeah. What happened in South Tyneside, you could read it in multiple ways. You might be tempted to read it as a precursor to Jamie Driscoll, the independent candidate for mayor of the North East. I don't think that's particularly fair. There are some quite local factors here in terms of a binman strike that I think turned a lot of people against the the incumbent councillors. I can understand that. We saw similar for the Labour Party in Sheffield, and we are seeing still, active now, we are still seeing similar for Conservative councillors in Plymouth who got absolutely bollocked by the electorate, primarily for the cutting down of trees. So small council scandals can sometimes really, turn public opinion on its head, as it has in South Tyneside here. Nevertheless, the fact you have Green candidates winning in traditionally Labour areas, getting entrenched and keeping things pretty keen for themselves, is something we are starting to see more and more of. As you move further down the Tyne, you see in parts of Newcastle proper Labour gains here. Biker ward, for instance. Look at that. Greens coming completely out of nowhere to take the seat off the Labour Party. 57% to the Labour Party's own 36%. And here's a perhaps more telling one, I think. Ellswick ward. This goes without saying, it's very Muslim, it's the very Asian part of Newcastle. Probably, I think, the only heavily Asian/Muslim part of the northeast. And you see a Green gain. 45% to Labour's 41%. Can we attribute that to Gaza? Can we attribute that to Israel and Palestine? I think you can say with some confidence it had a part to play. Yeah, absolutely you can. But to what extent, you don't really know, do you? I haven't been there. I haven't spoken to the people there. I'm not going to pretend to know with certainty. All I can do is project. But nevertheless, by and large, Labour had a pretty good night in the North East. They picked up new council seats off the Conservatives in Sunderland, but that was offset by being pretty much spanked in the South Tyneside and shedding some support in Newcastle. Nevertheless, they did hold their own in some bits. I can't remember where it is. They picked up a ward off the Lib Dems here in West Gosforth. So, yeah, that's the North East for you. And by the way, it goes without saying, it tells you one part of the story, but it doesn't tell you all of it. When you looked at Sunderland and you saw the sizable votes for reform, you might think, here we go. There's the split on the right. All we need to do is unite the right, and everything will be hunky-dory. Not so. You go to, let's go to Grimsby. And at the start of the night, when I did my briefing around about 10 p.m, I did say, look, Labour needs to show that it's made progress. It's made gains in Grimsby, because it didn't last year, and look what's happened this year. You're seeing some pretty sizable Labour gains. Not the most impressive increases in the Labour vote, but wins none the same. Look at this one as well, Croft Baker ward. Labour vote here up a more impressive 28 percentage points. Tories down 16. Another ward, Scartho ward here. Labour up 20 points. Tories down 18. South ward, Labour up 24 points. Maybe I'm taking this back. Maybe the vote increases is impressive. Tories down 15. And note the absence of a Reform candidate. Note how, with a Reform candidate, the Tory vote is collapsing. Without a Reform candidate, the Tory vote is also collapsing. So, if you're trying to make some easy analysis off Reform, don't, because I don't think you're going to be particularly accurate there. But yes, some very impressive gains by Labour in Grimsby. Didn't sweep the board, but did enough, I think, to say they are in contention to take back the seat. We are also seeing the same in Lincoln. A lot of these seats were voting Conservative. Take this one, Moorland ward. Small increases in the Labour vote there. Much bigger here in Hartsholme. That was a Labour hold. Another one, though, that was a Labour gain. There was a risk here tonight that the Tories were going to be wiped out in Lincoln. I think they had 4 to 5 seats up for grabs, and they ended up with just one, which is this one, the Witham ward, which they held by, I think, only 15 votes. In local elections, don't ever say your vote doesn't count, because it absolutely does. But yeah, Lincoln, an almost wipeout for the Conservatives. Peterborough, I find a very interesting one. Ignoring, of course, the how could you describe it? The Batman shape of the local authority. A lot of dark grey here, and what that is an independent grouping, not to be confused, of course, with Change UK, but local independent groupings. It seems to be like Tory offshoots, breaking with the Tory party, standing candidates in their own right, winning a hefty chunk of the Tory vote and holding on to a lot of their seats. It seems as if that blunted the Labour Party in certain seats, even though, you see a Labour gain here in East Ward, but only with a negligible increase in the vote share. You see the Lib Dems winning a seat off the Conservatives with a hefty increase in their own share. But in this ward, you see, the independent group coming out of nowhere to take a huge chunk of the Tory vote and winning the seat themselves. Peterborough, mixed bag, to be honest with you, but the collapse in the Tory share, the collapse in support for the Conservatives does warrant a comment. Also notice the increasing appearance of the Greens here. They won a ward in the centre of Peterborough, in Ravensthorpe. Look at that. It voted Labour in 2018 and 19, but the Greens have won it this year. That's very interesting. What's happening there? What's happening with the Labour campaign there? Why hasn't it taken off? And you notice another Green gain here, in a seat in which the Labour Party were second and the Labour Party were winning in 2019. Again, I ask, what is happening to Labour in Peterborough? But there are other seats, other boroughs, other marginals that show, an almost much improved performance for Labour. Redditch is one such case. New boundaries, so we don't know really how these seats used to vote. All I've done is been able to guess their notionals, how the ward probably voted, and long story short, all of these seats at the start of the night were blue. Now, all but two of them, these two, are red. Redditch has very much seen a dramatic swing away from the Conservatives to Labour, particularly in the town proper. It's only really on the outskirts that the Conservatives have held on. Not good for their parliamentary constituency prospects when the general election comes. Another seat to bear in mind is the one I mentioned in the earlier briefing, Rushmore. Now this has, you can see it there, Sandhurst. This has its military history, and you just look at all of this. Some very dramatic Labour swings. Labour up 16 points here, Labour up 14 points here, Tories down 20, Labour up 23 points here, Tories down 16. Look at that one as well. Labour up on 54%, up 38 points on 2021 when they were in third place. It goes without saying, this is dramatic stuff. Is it unexpected? Did you ever imagine Labour would be in contention in Aldershot? I never thought so. It seems as though we have to prepare for that potential now. Another ward result. Labour up 20 points, Tories down 16. So in certain con-lab fights, in more than enough con-lab fights, in which there is no spoiler party, Labour is almost sweeping it. We go also to Thurrock, the site at which UKIP almost won their second/third parliamentary seat in the 2015 general election. Remember that. It was a three-way split between, that was like 30% Conservative, 30% Labour, and like 29% UKIP. UKIP almost took this seat. Now it seems like Labour have come away with winning big in some pretty straight con-lab fights. Sizable enough swings. The only seat the Tories were able to hold on to was the rural seat of Orsett, and you saw some independent candidates picking up the outskirts of Thurrock proper from the Conservatives over there. Yeah, pretty much a lot of that. Another seat, another borough, another council area, however we want to call them, that almost saw the Conservatives wiped out was Portsmouth. You look at all of this. Again, though, it was an independent grouping that scored big here. Look at this. They're called the Portsmouth Independent Party, and they came out of nowhere in this ward to win 40% of the vote, to the detriment of the Conservative share and take the seat from the Conservatives. Take this one as well. Look at that. 55% out of nowhere for the Portsmouth Independent Party. The only seat the Conservatives were able to hold on was not on the island of Portsmouth, but on the mainland, which is Drayton and Farlington only, by the way, by the skin of their teeth. 38% to the independent groupings, 35%. Not exactly a vote of confidence, is it? Where else can we look at? Exeter. One thing we're beginning to notice, again, I think I mentioned it before, is the growing, the encroachment, the whatever you want to call it, the growth in Green support in, is it traditionally Labour, in urban Labour, in metrosexual Labour, whatever you want to call it. The kind of Labour in a city that's a little bit more, how can I say, more affluent, I suppose, than your traditional Labour seat. You're seeing the Greens flex their arms there just a little bit more, and you're seeing, despite some serious Labour gains nationally in the marginals that matter, in the battleground seats that matter, in a lot of the safer seats, these voters seem quite content to indulge the Greens. And we see it here in Exeter. We see the growth in support for the Greens, not just in their more university ward, but in the neighbouring ward as well. Nevertheless, you also see Labour advancing quite substantially into Tory territory here. So, now here's the one that's a bit more dramatic. Plymouth. I wish I could show you the results before. I wonder if I can actually. Let's just go to here. Let's just go to how the results used to look. Okay. Let's go down here. Let's view it in full screen. Yeah. So just as a reminder as well, this is what we've got to get filled in later today. There's a hell of a lot more results to go. But notice, of course, that not all of England are having council elections. But anyway, this is how Plymouth looked before last night. And this is how it is now. A dramatic swing to the Labour Party there. You see, that's how it voted. That's how it was at the close of poll. And that's how it was at the close of count. One Conservative seat reduced from the overwhelming majority. I'm not going to try to count. And the Greens, again, being able to pick up seats, not always in your traditional con-lab fights. When voters, it seemed, don't feel like they have that risk of letting the Conservatives back in, maybe they are more willing to go Green. But I say all this, but you do notice that in this seat, it doesn't seem as though the Greens appear to have got their support from Labour. Rather, it appears they've been eating into the Tory share. So something to consider about the Greens is they're not just a threat to the Labour Party, they're also a threat to the Conservatives in a completely different way. The environmentally Cameroon type Conservatives out there do see a lot in the Greens, and they don't perhaps associate them to be as left-wing as perhaps, a traditional left-wing commentator would. Nevertheless, in a lot of these straight fights, it was quite clearly carried by Labour. Look at that. Labour up 19 points. Tories down 36 points. And also, though, of course, Reform isn't doing as well as in Sunderland, Reform are picking up 14% here. Picking up 10% there, despite the Tories falling 17 points. Another seat, Labour up 13 points, and Reform pipping the Conservatives for second here, but on a pretty distant 20% of the vote. So yeah, a dramatic swing in Plymouth for the Labour Party, for the benefit of the Labour Party, to the detriment of the Conservatives. Harlow, which the BBC emphasised quite rightly, was one of the councils Labour missed from taking control of. It was new boundaries, new ward boundaries, so all the seats were up for grabs, and Labour just missed out. Although you will notice, I think if you add up all the votes, I don't want to be actually saying that unless I'm sure, but if you do add up all the votes, how does it happen? Yeah, how did it turn out? It was 8,000 votes for the Conservatives in Harlow, and 7,500 for Labour in Harlow. So though Labour were only one seat off having a majority, they were 500 votes off pipping the Conservatives for first place. So, yeah, a pretty evenly divided borough, Harlow. And when we get to the general election, always worth bearing in mind, the Harlow constituency is bigger than the Harlow Council, so Labour has a lot more work to do there. Ipswich, another case in which the Conservatives saw their vote reduced quite substantially, but the swings weren't as dramatic as in Plymouth. Look at this one. Labour, 44%, down 1 percentage point, pretty much standing still, but the Conservatives fell to 30%, falling 25 percentage points. Why? Because you saw votes go elsewhere. You saw 15% for Reform, 6% for the Greens, and 5% for the Lib Dems. But Labour stood still. Quite showing that. But yeah, the presence of Reform now is being felt on the electoral battlefield. You saw it in the Blackpool South by-election, but in terms of getting close to winning seats, no. It doesn't seem as though they're there, and I don't know if we'll have any seats over the course of tomorrow in which they'll score gold. Actually, maybe they will in the Rother Valley in parts of South Yorkshire, but jury's out on that one. But their presence is being felt. Their victories are still at zero, however. But yes, a very good night in Ipswich. Labour pick up a few seats off the Conservatives. Big Conservative falls there. What else is there to say, I suppose? Yeah. What else? Oh, yes, Greater Manchester. Welcome to Oldham, which is not Rochdale, but is close enough to Rochdale and has its fair share of Asian voters and has its own local problems. Now, Oldham has slowly been drifting away from the Labour Party. A few years ago, local independent groupings stormed bits of the seat, unseating the Labour leader of the council and other local bigwigs, and they've risen and they've fallen, they've faded, they've grown. And this year it seems as though they've had a bit more of a boost. You see their vote growing in certain wards. You see them really holding on to what they have, but you also see them, particularly in the centre of Rochdale, picking up further Labour seats with quite dramatic swings. How much of this can we attribute to Asian antipathy towards the Labour Party now? I don't know how much you can say, because Oldham already has its local problems with the Labour Party. It already has a local independent grouping doing particularly well, and it's just done well again. How much of that can you attribute to Israel, Gaza, Palestine? Don't know, but it's fair to say that it's not nothing, isn't it? Look at that one. Out of nowhere, independent gain from Labour, up 56 points from zero. 56% of the vote, Labour on 35, down 23 points there. A bit of a dramatic swing there. What about this ward over here? Alexandra ward. Labour down 29 points, up, from a safe like 60%. Now they're on 33%. The independents on 55. What happened there? Is it really just rebellion, against the local council, or is there something more to it? Because we don't have the results in Rochdale yet. I'll be very keen to see that. And when we do, let's see if there has been a Galloway bumper Galloway moment. But yeah. What else? Oh yes, I wanted to sort of emphasise it as well in here. So welcome to Bootle, which is one of the more poorer parts of Liverpool. Waterloo ward, Church ward is, it's got a nice beach. Don't know how else to describe it. I've been there a few times. But one thing I'm beginning to notice in certain parts of Liverpool, certain parts of urban England, that has a younger population, that has a population wanting, very much exhausted by housing and the general cost of living that all of us are broadly, to be honest, exhausted by. We are beginning to see the Greens break through in these very formerly safe, formerly super safe Labour areas. Look at this ward here. This was Labour 60% at the last election in 2021. Now it's 46, 47%, with the Greens on 50%. A bit of a surprise Labour Green gain there. Do you see it anywhere else, though? No. What about in Blundell Sands? No, you see the Labour vote actually increasing there. What about over here? Yeah, no, nothing. So in isolated cases, you're seeing the Greens break out. And I just want to emphasise, in the same way here. In isolated cases, you're also seeing Asian communities lash out at Labour. You're not seeing it across the board. You're not seeing it, sweep up, change the whole council narrative. But it does exist. It is happening. It's just not big enough to change the narrative. And the narrative is, when I point to Grimsby, when I point to Thurrock, when I point to Plymouth, when I point to Reading, when I point to Rushmore and other battleground seats, the Labour Party are wiping the floor with the Conservatives. The Conservatives are falling 20 points or more. The poll leads you see on twitter.com/BritAlex are very much being validated by what you are seeing on this map today. Dramatic swings to Labour, but in the more safer locales, people are looking to do something else. We've become more bubbleized, I suppose. We've become more, content to do something different in seats where we don't feel it is tight, I suppose. Take, for instance, Hartlepool. Hartlepool in 2021, let's just go back to this. Let's just go back to how it looked in 2021. Hartlepool, absolute catastrophe for Labour. This was one of the elections where I think Keir Starmer thought about resigning as Labour leader. But I think it was more the Batley and Spen by-election in which he, placed his, but anyway, placed his future career on. But anyway, Hartlepool, sizable Conservative wins here in 2021. And look what happens. Labour cleaned up shop. Notice the continued existence of independent candidates. Competitive with Labour here, but almost everywhere else. Look at that. Yes, dramatic swings to Labour. Reform not coming close anywhere, but taking, yes, a hefty chunk of the Conservative support. But I reiterate what I said earlier. The Conservatives are falling just as much in areas with reform strength as they are in areas without. So the idea that reform are the only reason that, the Conservatives are losing is a non-starter. That's not happening. That's not the case. Okay? But yeah, some big swings to Labour, dramatic swings to Labour in Hartlepool. But Hartlepool is not the seat you need to win a majority, is it? Especially if you're Labour. You need some other seats. You need seats beyond there. You need to be going... Well, you probably need Lincoln. You will need Peterborough. So there is a question mark over Peterborough. You will end up needing Redditch, which I think, goes without saying. Labour's had a good night there. You definitely would have never needed Rushmore. And yet here we are seeing Labour break ground in Rushmore in a way you just do not expect. And you definitely would have needed Labour advances in Thurrock. So whatever way you want to look at it, and there are plenty of ways to look at it because there are plenty of seats. But this is a good night for the Labour Party. They are likely to score hundreds of seat gains, probably 200 plus. We don't know the specific number yet. The Conservatives are likely to suffer close to 500 seat losses. It's going to be... Yes, I put out the forecast. My forecast was Conservatives to lose 470 seats. It seems as though it's going to reach that and probably pass it based on early indications. But I reiterate, we are only looking at a quarter of the results here. But quite some dramatic stuff. But the takeaway point of this, that if you take away one thing here today, it's this: the polls are right. The polls are right once again. And for the past 2 years, the polls which show you 20-point Labour leads, put some truck in them, because they're not rubbish. They're actually quite right. They're doing particularly well. The Blackpool South by-election, we forecast Labour to get 50% and the Conservatives to come away with 30% and Reform to get 13%. Labour outperformed that by 8 points. The Tories underperformed that by 12 points, 10 points, I think it was. And Reform, outperformed theirs by 3 points or thereabouts. That was a surprise. That was a surprise because, I'll be honest with you, Britain Predicts is no perfect model. It's definitely had its mistakes before, but that one was quite out of kilter. And to Labour's advantage, in a seat like Blackpool, where apathy is meant to be high, even though relative to where Blackpool normally turns out, the fall wasn't particularly great. It wasn't dramatic fall in turnout, dramatic fall in enthusiasm. It was just a fall in line with how it normally does for most seats. You can't blame apathy on the dramatic falls in Tory support anymore. Something else is happening. A lot of it is Tory supporters going Reform. Yes, that is happening. Could you squeeze them back? Maybe. But Reform voters, when you poll them, the level of antipathy they have towards the Conservative Prime Minister is pretty significant. It's a hard ask. But the level of antipathy felt towards Labour is huge. Like, you're talking hater, you're talking absolute hatred for the Labour brand, for Sir Keir Starmer, for the Ramona and all that kind of stuff, right? But yes, Blackpool was very decisive, and you cannot just blame apathy. You are having transfers from the Conservatives to Reform, and more importantly, that should never be understated, you are having transfers from the Conservatives to Labour, which is leading a lot of this change in the national composition, if you want to call it that. These swings in Rushmore, these swings in Redditch, there aren't reform candidates for these voters to go to. Some of them are staying at home, yes, but some of them are swinging as well. So that's that. With a quarter of the results in the local elections, counting is still to go, but I'm going to get some hours sleep. The takeaway of it is this: the polls are right. Those 20-point Labour leads you see on Twitter from the pollsters, it's bang on. And that's it. There'll be plenty more results to come. Something to bear in mind as well is the mayoral results, the PCC results. They could really dramatise this 20-point lead. We had the PCC election result in Lincolnshire. We had the Conservatives almost lose Lincolnshire, with Boston, with Brexity Boston. They almost lost it by about 9,000 votes to Labour, and they didn't. But the collapse in the Tory share and the relative rise of Reform, that wasn't, the mirror image, made me think, my God, even in seats in which the Reform candidate isn't there, seats like North Yorkshire, maybe Labour is in with a chance, because the Tory fall is so dramatic. Maybe even Labour can win in, rural, I emphasise rural North Yorkshire, which is just not normal. It's not normal at all. British politics right now is not normal. It's not made for parties leading by 20 percentage points, and yet here we are. So enjoy the results while you can, I suppose. Yes. A quarter of the results are now in. There'll be plenty more to come. You can always keep an eye on the results via Britain Elects. We are on twitter.com/Britain Elects. You're probably already following us anyway. Thanks for doing that if you do. New Statesman website, the sotn.newstatesman.com, has the ward-by-ward map. I will be updating that as the day progresses. I must say, however, I am going for some sleep right now because I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm also ill as can be. But yeah, the takeaway of it is this. The polls you see, the 20-point Labour leads are right. Bang to rights. The Blackpool South result was almost over and above what you would expect, what the polls are showing, actually. And so, yeah, dramatic swings, dramatic seat changes are to come. But anyway, what does that say about the future of Rishi Sunak? Tim Montgomery on the BBC was saying it's time to get rid of him straight away. Another, the Conservative minister wheeled out to defend him, was saying, got to stay the course. But the voters don't like the course, so they'll just continue punishing you, won't they? But they don't want the drama of another, prime ministerial bout in Westminster. So, anyway, Liam on Twitter says I should get some Red Bull down me. That's what I've done. I've had coffee. I've had more bowls of cereal than I'll admit, actually. I don't know why. But and popcorn. Not healthy, but what can you do? Anyway, right, I'm off for a few hours sleep. I'll see you later. But thank you very much for watching. Keep an eye on Twitter, on Maps, on anywhere else for the results. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later on. Bye-bye.